Hi, and welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Pho, founder and editor of KevinMD. Today on the show, we have Nidhi Kukreja. She is a pediatrician, and she wrote the KevinMD article, How COVID-19 Will Close Pediatric Practices. Nidhi, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
So before we get into your article, can you share your story and your journey to where you are today?
Sure. So I was born in India. We moved here when I was 3 years old to the Chicago area and grew up in suburbs, not really suburbs, far suburbs, you could say. From a young age, I think I knew I wanted to go into medicine or be a doctor, like a lot of young people do, right? I think it was in fifth grade where we first had our human body class, and I was like fascinated. So from there, in ninth grade, my dad had open heart surgery, triple bypass, and I felt like I just needed to know what was going on. So decided to go to undergrad and med school in St. Louis, at St. Louis U, and then came back to Chicago, got married. We both did residency in the city. I did peds at Rush, and since I graduated, have been working on the southwest side of the city. And I think being a immigrant, and I think it largely influenced like my decision of where to practice and how and why. You know, I felt like I really wanted to give back to immigrant communities. We had a really strong work ethic, you know, instilled in us growing up, where education was super important. And I wanted to use what I had learned and, you know, who I had become to help people who were, you know, similarly struggling. Like we did decent in growing up, but I remember when we moved to our first apartment, eating, like it's a very clear memory in my mind, eating from on a table made out of a cardboard moving box. So, you know, those kind of things really made me decide that I wanted to work with young immigrant families, and that's where I've been since for about 10 years.
And how has the pandemic affected both you and your practice?
It's a daily struggle where there was a quiet period right in the last month or two, but now we're trying to plan for the fall, like I think everybody is, for the second surge, and there have been a lot of sleepless nights. We've made it, you know, so far. It's telemedicine has been a wonderful boon for our practice. I found it to be a really nice way to connect with patients. But, you know, the question is, you know, how long can we survive with, if the majority of our visits are not telemedicine anymore, but probably about 25 to 40% are. It's a struggle. It's real. The things we see are very real. And I think that's more important than our own struggles and trying to sort it out. But we can talk about it some more, but the socioeconomic struggles that we see with our patients are tough. You know, it's not something that's just a word, honestly, like, and I'm sure you know, we worry about the kids we see. Sure. And things are getting worse for them.
Now that segues nicely into your KevinMD article, How COVID-19 Will Close Pediatric Practices. Yeah. Now, for those who haven't read your article, can you walk my audience through your article and share the story of why you decided to write it?
Since I started practicing in a private practice, I've learned a lot about the reimbursement issues that specifically apply to our largely Medicaid population. Our clinic is 85% Medicaid. And several years ago, before I started at this practice, Illinois had gone to an MCO setup basically for Medicaid. So these are privately owned insurance companies that manage the Medicaid funds that that the state has in order to distribute them to practices who are seeing these patients. And since that's happened, things have been pretty chaotic for practices. There's been real irregularity of payments, asking for payments to come back, to be returned. Oh, that patient wasn't assigned to you, even though at the time we review everything and they were, and things like that. Newborns not being assigned at the right time, when we need to see them. So we see them, the payment's delayed, the payment may not ever come, but we see them because it's a newborn and they need to be seen. So things like that. When COVID happened, this is all in the background, but it really kind of stirred me up, made me feel like we may actually close. This might be the end of our practice, and really made me sad for where our patients would go, what would happen. So yeah, there was some sleepless nights, and that's where the article came from. Do I really, at this point, think our practice is going to close, or many pediatric practices are going to close? Probably not. I think we're doing okay. We have had some support from the Paycheck Protection Program, and now the CARES Act has been extended to Medicaid practices at a certain percentage. I think it's 2 or 3%, not the 6% that Medicare practices got. But I felt like at the time, writing it was important because, yeah, maybe I'm preaching to the choir. Maybe all physicians know this, but I wanted that article to be seen by a broader audience than I could reach by just, talking to the people I know.
I think it's very important for you to write these stories because a lot of people outside of the physician community actually don't know some of the financial struggles that a lot of private practices are going through. So I was wondering if you could share what are some of the real life consequences that you face from being so uncertain regarding the financial status of your practice?
I can tell you about something we were discussing yesterday at our team meeting. This fall, we're expecting a surge of all the fall and winter viruses, right? Just like we always do. However, to be careful and to follow CDC guidelines, we need to make sure that we're not giving nebulizer treatments in our office. Or if we are, we have plenty of PPP, which we don't. We have some. We can see some patients, as we've seen this summer in our office, several a day maybe, or maybe just a few a day that are sick. Like I said, we do a lot of telemedicine and we're able to guide patients where to go to get COVID testing. We're not doing COVID testing in our office right now. But in the fall, we want to be able to do flu testing. We want to be able to do COVID testing because those two mimic each other. We don't really know. Strep testing, of course, and we want to be able to provide the appropriate treatments for the patients as we've always done, like nebulizers for a patient who's wheezing. So if you can't use a nebulizer, you have to use an inhaler, right? And that's safer. Inhalers cost like $40 to $80 a pop. We can't reuse them. We get paid about $40 to $80 for a visit. So we're trying to figure out how we're going to manage, because that means, we're doing this at a loss.
If you were a policy expert in charge of healthcare policy in the country, now what are some of the solutions that you would propose to fix this?
Oh my goodness, I'm not a policy expert. But yeah, no, I think things do need to come from the top down. I think there needs to be regular payments for each patient we see, not third of Medicare payments. I don't understand why Medicaid rates are much lower than Medicare rates, and why in Illinois, at least, they're stagnant for about 20 years, So whereas cost of living and just the cost of owning a practice has gone up significantly. So that's one thing. As far as our patients are concerned, that obviously would trickle down and help them, but not to sound like, this is all about our practice and our survivability. There is so much more needed in leveling the playing field for our families.
We are talking to Nidhi Kukreja. She's a pediatrician in Chicago, and she wrote the KevinMD article, How COVID-19 Will Close Pediatric Practices. Now, Nidhi, there are a lot of other private practices that are also struggling during this pandemic. Now, is there anything that you've learned that you can share with these practices to help them?
I think what I've learned is to focus, instead of, like I said, things should come from the top down, and we need to, we need things to change like to yesterday, because that just makes me upset. So I think I'm learning still that I need to focus on the small things that I can do as an individual. I'd love to think that things would happen that way, but they don't, and they're not right now. And I mean, I still have hope that they will, but in the meantime, one thing that I've been thinking that I really need to understand and do is, for example, the kids that are, I think, going to be affected most by the COVID pandemic and by school closures are the children who have IEPs and 504 plans, developmental delays, or learning disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those kids and their families are going to need a lot of help advocating for their needs in the fall come school.
Sure.
Because it didn't really happen in the springtime.
Sure.
So I think as pediatricians and as providers, I need to just educate myself, one, and two, kind of be prepared to answer questions and give my patients as much information and about what they can do.
Sure. And my final question, do you have a take-home message that you want to share with the KevinMD audience? I
think it's to not give up. Yes, things are really, really hard right now, and it's easy to be discouraged. And I have a quote that I found that it's not my quote. Robin Allie Hay posted it, and she's a physician coach, and it's from The Courage to Create by Rollo May. A choice confronts us. Shall we, as we feel our foundation shaking, withdraw in anxiety and panic, frightened by the loss of our familiar mooring places? Shall we become paralyzed and cover our inaction with apathy? If we do those things, we will have surrendered our chance to participate in the forming of the future. We will have forfeited the distinctive characteristic of human beings, namely to influence our evolution through our own awareness. We will have capitulated to the blind juggernaut of history and lost the chance to mold the future into a society more equitable and humane. So I think we have the chance. As people who are privileged and sometimes in positions of power, we need to keep speaking up.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and your insight, and thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, Kevin. Take care.